Welcome to Retirement Ramblings. I'm Scott, and today is day 168 on my countdown to retirement, plus a catch up for day 169. So, the last 2 days have been a whirlwind for me. I've spent them mostly in the emergency room of the local hospital. So, on Wednesday evening, my wife had gone in for a GI motility study, which is esophageal mammometry, which is a diagnostic test that measures the muscle contractions in the esophagus, helping to diagnose swallowing difficulties. She had her esophagus stretched and thought that that was going to resolve the problem, but when she's eating, the food doesn't like always go down the way that she expects. So she was, trying to get that diagnosed and figure out what they could do to resolve the problem. So to test that, they take a scope, which is really a thin wire with a camera on it, and they stick it up your nose, and then it goes down your throat, and they can make you drink a liquid while you swallow. They can actually monitor the muscles in your esophagus as it pushes in this case, the liquid down into your stomach. Well, they were having trouble getting it. I guess they started on her right nostril. They put lidocaine in and then started to insert the tube, and it just wouldn't go down. And she was gagging or whatever and really tensing up. And then finally, she made them stop that. They switched it to the left nostril and went up and down and didn't have any problems. Well, when they did the test, as I just indicated, she was freaking out about the stuff. And so when the test was over, she was complaining about a tightness in her chest and pain radiating down her arms. And she was dizzy, and her legs were giving out, and she had pain across the back of her shoulder blades. So she sat in the waiting area, and I was at work, so she had driven herself to this test, which is the very first time she's ever gone to have any kind of a diagnostic test where I didn't take her. But normally she asks me to check my calendar before she books something, and then I tell her what days I have available that I can go take her, and then she books one of those days. She didn't do that this time because there wasn't going to be any anesthesia or anything that was required, so she just figured she'd be able to drive herself. So she did. Well, anyway, she called me, told me she was going to just wait around, see if she felt better, and then, she would drive home, and if she couldn't, then I would go down and pick her up. So after a while, she still wasn't feeling better, and so the technician that had performed the test took her to the emergency room within the hospital where she was running the original test, and they were checking her out for, a potential heart attack. And so they did a chest x-ray, they took blood, they, what else did they end up doing? They did an EKG, right? And she thought that she was getting ready to be released because she was just sitting there. So she contacted me to come get her. So I asked my sister-in-law to drive me down there because it's actually across town. And so I knew I was going to have to go into work the following day, and I wouldn't be able to go pick up her car if I drove my truck down there, got her, and then brought her home. So anyway, my sister-in-law took me down to the hospital so I could just pick my wife and bring her back in her car. So then I get in there thinking I'm just going to pick her up, so no big deal. Well, then I'm in there, and then one of the techs comes over and says, oh no, she's not going to be released because there's some enzyme that's in her blood work that's not right, and so they're going to take her down to what they called a hallway room in the ER. I was like, okay. And then they would come back and get me. So they took her away, and some time passed, and they finally came back and got me, brought me to where she was. And at that point, they had already inserted, what do you call it? I guess lines, for lack of a better description, IVs, that they could draw blood out of into both arms. And they had her hooked up on a heparin drip. And they were basically looking to see to thin out her blood to make sure she didn't have any clots, what have you. So they were taking vial after vial of blood. I mean, it was a constant. And then it was sending it off. They were checking this marker. They were checking that marker. the numbers were coming back and they kept going up. There was a particular marker, I think it's troponin, I think is how you pronounce it. Anyway, it started at one number that was already 23 times higher than it's supposed to be. And each time they took it, it was getting higher and higher. And eventually, the last time they took it, it was 67, almost 68 times higher than it's supposed to be. So at that point, the cardiologist came down, talked to us, told us that they were going to schedule her for a cardiac catheterization and they were going to do an echocardiogram. They were going to do it in the morning, unless so while they tried to stabilize her blood work. But if the blood work continued to get worse, they would do an emergency one in the evening to try and resolve whatever the underlying cause was. So again, they increased her dosage of the heparin. They put her on nitroglycerin. Again, they kept taking the blood. The numbers kept going up. She was also in a ton of pain. They eventually added morphine into the drip. And everything was fine. They kept telling us they were trying to find a room to put her in, because again, this hallway room is really, literally, it's a hallway, and there's a number on the wall that says what marker you are. So she was, a specific room number, and the nurses there were great, though, kept coming over, doing exactly what they needed to do. They were trying to stabilize her. Anyway, I ended up being there for like another 6 hours after I had arrived. My sister-in-law had at that point long gone home. I was waiting for them to get the room, which they continued to say they couldn't tell us when that was going to happen. Anyway, when it got to be like 10:30 and the visiting hours were all over and whatever, finally they said that they weren't going to be doing any more blood work until 4 o'clock in the morning, and so she was just going to be able to rest there until they found a room. So at that point, I decided I was going to go home, try and get some sleep. So I left, and once I got home, which was about a half an hour later, she texted me to tell me they moved her into one of the rooms in the ER because the local fire department, EMT folks, started bringing in people that were needed to go into the psych ward, and the people were causing a major ruckus in the hallway where she was, that was freaking her out, which was causing the pains to get worse and whatever. So they moved her into this really little area. It was like 8 by 5. Literally, you could have a chair next to the bed, and then there was a curtain that they could pull across. But that was about as good as it got. Anyway, got home, ate something because I hadn't eaten all day, and then finally went to sleep. That was the end of my day 169. Day 168 today, after about 6 hours of sleep, got up, went back to the hospital. By the time I got there, they had already done the echocardiogram, although they never did say what they found on that during the time. I ended up reading the notes later on, and it came back normal for rhythm and for shape. But at the time, I didn't know that. They also, didn't take any additional blood work values and let us know what they were, other than they were still high and hadn't come back down. And then the cardiac surgeon finally came in and then talked to us about the cardiac catheterization process they were going to go through, and basically explained all the risks that were associated with it and what they were going to try and do. And basically, they were going to go up a vein in her right arm into the heart, looking for blockages. If they found, small blockage or something, they would use a balloon angioplasty, open up the vein, insert a stent to get the blood flow going again, and that'd be fine. If it was anything more than that, they would end up having to transfer her to another hospital for open heart surgery. So we signed off on all the paperwork, and then at 10:39 this morning, they took her in to start the prep work. And the prep work took a ton of time, apparently, like 40 minutes or more to just do the prep work before they actually did the procedure. Then then they moved me from the ER room into the cardiac recovery room area where I sat waiting for her, and that was adjacent to where the surgical suite was, so the doctor could come straight out, and just talk to me and tell me what was going on. So after he performed the procedure, he came out and told me that, to his surprise, there wasn't any blockage. He checked all the arteries. There was no plaque buildup, no nothing. So his best guess on what it was a cardiac vasospasm, which they normally call these days, I think, angina, like a cardiac angina, where you have a rapid contraction of a muscle that cuts off blood flow to a given area, simulates a heart attack, but is not actually a heart attack. So, and you can control that with medication. So anyhow, he ended up giving her a clean bill of health relative to that procedure, but he couldn't go up the vein apparently for some reason, so they had to go up the artery instead. So because of that, they were going to need to keep her overnight because they put a brace on her arm to immobilize it because because of the heparin, which is a blood thinner, they needed to wait until they could confirm a clot or the blood clotting process had finalized where they went into the artery. Because they said if she started bleeding, they wouldn't be able to stop the blood because of the blood thinning that they had gone through. So she wasn't allowed to move her right hand, her right arm, or her fingers at all for 24 hours. So they had it immobilized in this little brace thing. And then finally, about 2 hours, 3 hours after the procedure, they finally got a room that opened up on the cardiac monitoring floor, and she got moved up there. And by this time, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I got her all comfortable there, made sure everything was stabilized, met the nurses and what have you, and got her all set up for this evening, and then said my goodbyes and headed home, where I got home like around 5:30, around 5:30, quarter 6. And then I spoke with her just a little while ago to make sure everything was good. She's supposedly going to be discharged tomorrow, probably around 4 p.m. So that's been my last 2 days, which was kind of freaking me out. First of all, my wife turned 70 this year, and as you guys know, I'm 64. And so, one of the reasons I'm retiring this year is because I was worried about deteriorating health as we age and wanted to make sure that we could go on the trips that we had planned and just, enjoy the retirement life that we wanted. And then, as everyone says, you never know what your health span is going to be. Not your lifespan, but your health span. And so once you start having health problems, pretty much it becomes a snowball and, the problems continue. So this was, the first one, well, really, her starting with her eyes last year. This became the second or third thing now in a snowballing effect of things that are happening between her 69th and 70th birthday, really 68th to 70th birthday. So definitely, not taking it for granted. I did make sure that the doctor told me that she had a clean bill of health relative to going on our cruise that we're planning, in a few weeks, doing the activities that I've already got planned. And he gave her, a clean bill of health to be able to do that. So I was happy about that. But, it's just a wake up call to basically say you can't take your health for granted. And, retiring as soon as possible to be able to take care of your healthy years is a good idea. So my 2 cents. But that's my update for today and for yesterday. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them in the comment section down below or drop me an email at myretirementramblings@gmail.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great evening, and until tomorrow, take care.